Okay, so you know how much you love a good thought-provoking argument, right? Well, today we're going really deep on someone who knew how to make a strong case. We're talking about Lucrezia Marinella.
Lucrezia Marinella.
Yeah, a Venetian author, back in the 16th and 17th centuries.
Yes. Marinella. Now she's fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
she did write a lot on devotional stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Religious works.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it's her philosophical polemics that we really want to dig into today.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, there's this work she wrote in 1600. It's called The Nobility and Excellence of Women with the Defects and Vices of Men. I mean, come on, even the title tells you she's not messing around.
He's getting right to the point.
Absolutely.
No beating around the bush there.
Nope.
So for all of our listeners out there who really get into these big historical debates, the ones about the nature of women, like what does it even mean to be a woman? What's a woman's worth?
Oh, yeah, the whole Querelle des Femmes thing.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking
Yeah.
about. And Marinella's book is a huge turning point in this whole conversation.
It really is.
It's one of the first treatises, in this polemical style, written by a woman, in Italian, no less.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So for our listeners who are, into philosophy and love getting into the nitty-gritty of arguments, our mission today is to unpack Marinella's ideas about women, their nature and worth.
A big mission.
Yeah, it is. And especially we're going to focus on her claim that women are actually superior.
Oh, yeah, she went there.
That women are superior to men. So how are we going to do this?
Well, we've got some excellent source material to work with. We're going to be referencing the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Marinella. This gives us a really solid look at her life, her work, and, what modern scholars think about her arguments. It's really important to keep in mind, the whole context that she was writing in. I mean, her work is so powerful because it's directly responding to all this misogyny that was just, floating around at the time. Specifically, she was really taking on this guy, Giuseppe Passi, and his book, The Defects of Women.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it's like she's going head to head with him.
Okay, so let's set the stage here a bit. Who was Lucrezia Marinella, and what was going on intellectually during her life that shaped her thinking?
So Marinella, she was born in Venice sometime between 1571 and 1579, and she lived there her whole life. Actually died there in 1653.
Okay.
Now, her father, Giovanni Marinelli, he was a physician.
Interesting.
Yeah. And apparently he was really invested in making sure she was well educated. I mean, he gave her access to all these books.
Wow.
Not just, medical stuff, but also natural philosophy, literature, all sorts of things.
That's pretty unusual for a woman back then.
Oh, absolutely. It was a really unique opportunity, and you can tell it really paid off.
For sure. For sure. So what did she write?
Well, she wrote in a lot of different genres,
Mm-hmm.
but her philosophical polemics really show how deeply she understood classical literature. It's clear that she was trained in rhetoric and dialectic.
Really?
Yeah, which is pretty rare for women at the time.
Yeah.
Now, The Nobility wasn't her first book, but it's definitely her most famous. And get this, it seems like she was actually asked to write it.
Like commissioned.
Yeah. Either by this guy, Lucio Scarano, she dedicated the book to him, or maybe by the publisher, Giovanni Battista Ciordi.
Oh, wow.
But the reason they wanted her to write it seems to be because of Passi's book, like a direct response to his attack on women.
So they knew she was the one to go to on this topic.
Exactly.
She already had a reputation. That's interesting.
Yeah, she was known for her intellect, for sure. And, another thing that's really cool is that she wrote in Italian.
Oh, so not in Latin.
Nope, the everyday language of the people, which meant that way more people could read her work.
Including women.
Especially women, yeah.
That's really strategic.
Oh, it was brilliant.
Okay, so we know she wasn't just some lone voice out there.
Right.
She had support, people who believed in her and wanted her ideas out in the world, and they knew she could argue.
And she could argue. They knew that she was a serious scholar, a really rigorous thinker, and a powerful philosopher.
And that she was a woman. Yeah.
And that she was a woman. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, this brings up an interesting question.
It does.
Was Marinella what we would call a feminist today?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? I mean, the Stanford Encyclopedia entry mentions that scholars tend to use terms like pro-woman or proto-feminist when talking about her, and there's a good reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, the word feminist, as we use it today, it's kind of a modern invention. It really gained traction in the 19th century, with specific political and social goals in mind.
Right. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah. Plus, scholars are always careful about not, imposing modern ideas onto historical figures. Like maybe Marinella had different motivations than what we might assume. this scholar, Virginia Cox, she suggests that, women back then might have defended women for all sorts of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they wanted to prove how smart they were, to fit in with the humanist circles or to get patronage, or maybe even just to show off the rhetorical skills.
It's a good point. It reminds us that things were very different back then.
Oh, totally. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
the Stanford Encyclopedia entry also points out that you could call Marinella a feminist in a broader sense.
How so?
Well, if we think of a feminist as someone who basically challenges male dominance over women,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, Marinella definitely fits the bill. I mean, she was directly criticizing the sexism and misogyny of her time. Some scholars make a distinction between intellectual resistance and political resistance.
Mm-hmm.
They say that earlier figures like Marinella, they were mainly engaging in intellectual resistance. But other scholars, like Sarah Gwyneth Ross, they have a broader view of feminism in the 15th and 16th centuries.
Interesting.
And they see figures like Marinella as engaging in a range of feminist activities. So while the word feminist might not map perfectly onto what Marinella was doing,
Right.
her main goal was to fight back against male supremacy, which is a core feminist concern.
Okay, so we have to be careful about using labels.
Always.
But it's fair to say that she was a major figure leading up to modern feminism. Yeah, she was definitely ahead of her time. All right, so let's really dive into the meat of her argument in The Nobility and Excellence of Women. What was the intellectual context for this work? You've mentioned Passy, but who else was she responding to? And how does she structure her argument?
Okay, so the Nobility comes out of this long history of debate about women.
Mm-hmm.
You could say it really gets going 2 centuries before Marinella with Christine de Pizan's The Book of the City of Ladies.
Okay.
It's a classic.
Yeah, but she's directly responding to Giuseppe Passy.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, The Defects of Women came out just a year before her book.
Wow. Talk about a quick response.
Yeah, she didn't waste any time.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, her book actually follows a very similar structure to his.
So she's kind of using his own game against him.
Exactly. Passy relied a lot on ancient and medieval authorities, especially Aristotle,
Mm-hmm.
to back up his claims that women were inferior. So Marinella, she does this clever thing.
What's that?
She uses Aristotelian concepts, but then she turns around and critiques Aristotle himself.
Oh, smart.
Yeah, it undermines his authority.
She's meeting him on his own turf, but then showing how shaky the ground is.
Exactly.
Okay, so Passy was pretty brutal, right?
Yeah, he was.
Saying women were flawed, irrational, ruled by their emotions, and he even questioned whether they were fully rational.
Yeah, he went there.
And Marinella's saying, nope, that's all wrong.
Totally wrong.
And not only that, she goes further to say that women have a distinct nature that's actually superior.
And she goes even further to say that that superiority
Mm-hmm.
is based in, like, the very essence of their being.
Yeah. Okay, so let's break down how she builds this argument. She uses this idea of nobility, and the 4 causes, that's classic Aristotelian philosophy, right?
It is.
So tell us how she uses that to make her case.
Okay, so nobility to Marinella, it wasn't just about social status,
Oh.
It was about your place in the grand scheme of things and how well you fulfilled the duties that came with that place.
Mm-hmm.
It's tied to your inherent worth given to you by God.
So are you saying your worthiness is based on...
Yeah, it's based on the purpose you were created for.
Right.
And she also draws on Dante's view of nobility being this inner moral and intellectual capacity. So when Marinella argues for the nobility of women, she's saying that women have a higher purpose, a better essence than men.
I see.
And to make this point philosophically, she uses the 4 causes that Aristotle talked about.
Right.
Material, formal, efficient, and final.
Mm-hmm.
But she puts her own twist on it.
Yeah.
Like she's blending Aristotle with Plato.
Okay, so let's go through them one by one, starting with the efficient cause.
All right, so the efficient cause is what brings something into being. And for Marinella, the efficient cause of everything, both men and women, is God.
Okay.
So in that sense, she's saying that there's no difference between men and women when it comes to the ultimate source of their existence.
Right.
But then she says, hold on,
Okay.
there are differences in worth when you look at the formal cause.
The formal cause.
Yeah, and this is where she brings in Plato's ideas. Well, Plato talked about these divine ideas, right? These perfect blueprints or concepts that exist in God's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Marinella says that the value of something that's created, it depends on how noble that initial idea was.
So she's suggesting that God's idea for women could actually be nobler than his idea for men.
That's exactly what she's saying.
So it's possible that God, in a way, valued women more in his initial creation.
It's possible, yeah.
That's a pretty radical idea for her time.
It is. It lays the groundwork for her later arguments about how men and women are fundamentally different.
Okay, I'm following. So efficient cause, God, same for both. Formal cause, maybe different, maybe women's is nobler. What about the material cause? What'd she do with that?
This is where she gets really clever.
Okay.
She uses this argument that was already circulating in pro-woman writings from folks like Christine de Pizan and Agrippa.
Right.
Remember the biblical creation story?
Mm-hmm.
Woman was created from the rib of man.
Right.
But man was created from dust from the earth. Marinella points out that the rib came from man, who was already a living being, with a soul. But the dust was just lifeless matter.
Okay.
So she's saying that the very material that women were made from, it's superior.
Interesting.
It's like God used the good stuff to make women.
I love it. Okay, so she turned that creation story completely on its head.
She did.
Okay, so let's recap. Efficient cause, same for both. Formal cause, maybe different. Maybe women have a nobler one. Material cause, superior for women. What about the final cause? Does she say anything about how the ultimate purpose of men and women might be different?
Well, she doesn't really have a whole section on the final cause.
Okay.
But she kind of implies it throughout her work.
Right.
If women are nobler by nature, then their purpose has to be nobler too, right?
Right. Makes sense.
The final cause in Aristotle's thinking. It's all about achieving your perfect form and function.
Right.
And Marinella is saying that women are closer to that perfection because of their superior qualities.
Okay, I'm with you. So she set the stage by talking about these causes. But how does she handle the idea that men and women share the same rational soul and are part of the same species? That seems like a big challenge for her argument.
It is a big challenge.
Right.
But she tackles it head on. She acknowledges that most philosophers at the time, people like Fonte, Agrippa, Castiglione, they all agreed that men and women have the same rational soul and belong to the same species.
Right.
But Marinella, she says, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Just because they share the same kind of soul doesn't mean those souls are equal in nobility.
Okay.
She says that even within the same species, you can have differences in how noble a soul is right from the start.
So it's not about the kind of soul, but the quality of the soul.
Exactly.
I see.
She goes on to say that women's souls were created nobler than men's.
Okay.
Which means that maybe there are variations in God's idea of the human species. She uses this analogy.
What's that?
She says that things can be the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like two apples. But they can still be different in terms of their quality.
Right.
Like one apple can be sweeter or juicier.
Right.
It's the same with souls. They're all rational, but some are just better.
Okay. And she says women have the better souls.
She does. And she also says that the soul isn't just about reason.
What else is there?
She brings up the desiring part of the soul.
A desiring part.
Yeah, this is a concept from Aristotle. It includes things like our appetites, our emotions, our will, basically the stuff that influences us even though it's not rational.
Right.
And Marinella says that women are better at controlling their desires.
Okay.
That their desiring part is more virtuous and well-ordered.
So basically she's saying women are more rational and have more self-control.
Exactly. And get this, she says that having better self-control actually makes women smarter.
Really?
Yeah. She says it helps their intellect. She points to examples of women being more temperate and having more self-restraint.
Okay.
And then she makes this really interesting point about how society views women. She says that men honor women, which means that deep down, men recognize that women have something they don't.
Like they see women as superior in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She says, and I'm quoting her here, nobody honors another person unless they know that the person has some gift or quality that is superior to his own.
That's a really good point. It's like she's saying that our actions reveal what we truly believe, even if we don't say it out loud.
Yeah, she's insightful.
For sure. Okay, so we've covered how she argues from these philosophical concepts. Yeah. And the soul. But then she also talks about evidence from bodies, right?
She does.
How does she use physical evidence to back up her claim that women are superior?
So Marinella, she believed that the body is a reflection of the soul. Like the soul shapes the body.
Right.
And she says that means you can learn about someone's soul by looking at their body.
Interesting.
She claims that women's bodies actually show that they're superior.
Okay.
And she focuses on two things.
Yeah.
First, how moderate women's body temperature is. And second, how beautiful they are.
She connects beauty to superiority.
She does. She actually says the greater nobility and worthiness of a woman's body is shown by its delicacy, its complexion, and its temperate nature, as well as by its beauty.
All right, let's start with temperature. How does she use that to argue for women's superiority?
So Marinella believed that if your body temperature is moderate, it means that your reason can control your desires.
Okay.
And she says that women have a more balanced temperature than men. She thought men were too hot.
Interesting. So she's saying women are more rational because they're cooler.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. She's actually arguing with Aristotle.
Oh, I knew Aristotle would come up.
He was a big deal back then.
For sure. What did Aristotle say?
Aristotle said that women were less hot than men, and that meant they were less perfect.
Okay.
Marinella agreed that women were cooler, but she totally disagreed that it made them imperfect.
Oh.
She even pointed out that Aristotle contradicted himself sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, about the link between heat and intelligence.
So she's using Aristotle's own ideas against him.
She is.
Clever.
Very clever. She basically says that being hot makes you impulsive. It means you're ruled by your passions and not by reason. So women being cooler actually gives them an advantage.
Okay, so coolness equals self-control, which means you're better at thinking and making decisions.
You got it.
She's making a pretty strong argument.
She is. She also uses this argument about geography.
What's that?
She says if being hot makes you nobler, then women who live in hot climates should be considered more noble than men who live in cold climates.
Ah, I see.
And of course, nobody at the time would agree with that.
Right, it would undermine the whole male hierarchy.
Exactly. And she takes it even further.
Tell me more.
She says that when men do something amazing, it's often because they become more feminine, more temperate.
So she's turning the whole idea of what's good on its head.
She's a master at that.
I love it. All right, so we've covered temperature. What about beauty? How does she link beauty to superiority?
Okay, so this is where she brings in Plato again.
Plato's back.
Yeah, he's back. Marinella argues that men are totally captivated by women's beauty. And she sees that as proof of women's superiority.
Wait, so men being attracted to women proves that women are superior?
That's what she's saying. To her, beauty wasn't just skin deep.
Okay.
It was a sign of a beautiful soul. And remember those divine ideas. Well, she says that women's beauty is a reflection of God's perfect idea of woman.
I see. So she's saying women are more beautiful because they're closer to the divine, to God's ideal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She relies on these philosophers like Ficino and Leone Abreu,
Okay.
who said that our world is a reflection of a higher divine world.
Yeah.
And that beauty in our world is just an image of God's beauty. And she even quotes Leone Abreu directly, saying that divine beauty is the first and principal cause of women's beauty.
Okay.
And she also says that beauty is more than just the physical body. It comes from the soul. She says it's a grace or splendor proceeding from the soul as well as from the body. And that the soul is the cause and origin of physical beauty.
So a beautiful woman is beautiful inside and out.
That's the idea.
And because men are so drawn to this beauty.
Marinella says it means they recognize that women are better.
Better, more what? Virtuous?
More virtuous, closer to God, more perfect. She even says that compared to women, all men are ugly.
Wow, she doesn't hold back. That's quite a statement.
No, she doesn't. And then she gets even more provocative.
What does she say?
She suggests that when women love men, it's not because they're physically attracted to them.
So why do they love men then?
She says it's more out of courtesy.
Courtesy. What does that even mean?
Well, remember at the time, women were often accused of being lustful and uncontrolled. So Marinella's kind of turning that around. She's saying, actually, women's desires are way more controlled than men's. And they don't just fall for any handsome face because men aren't even that handsome anyway.
Right. So it's a strategic move to counter those stereotypes.
Yeah, totally. She's basically saying that women are more rational in their love. They're not just driven by lust. And she links this to their temperate nature and their well-ordered souls where reason is in control.
Okay, so she's really weaving all of these arguments together, the soul, temperature, beauty, to make her case for women's superiority. Now, I'm curious, she's making some pretty radical claims, right?
Oh, yeah, she is.
And she's doing it by engaging with these big philosophical ideas. So as philosophers today, how do we understand her arguments? What are her methods, and how should we interpret her work?
Well, for one thing, Marinella was a really careful scholar.
Mm.
She cited her sources meticulously,
Hmm.
which was actually pretty rare back then. Yeah, a lot of writers were kind of sloppy with their citations.
Interesting.
But not her. She knew exactly who she was disagreeing with and where to find their arguments.
So she did her research.
She did. And the way she uses citations is really smart.
How so?
She does two things.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes she'll quote someone to support her own point.
Right.
But other times she'll quote someone to show how their argument is wrong.
Oh, clever.
Yeah. And she does this a lot with Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's saying, look, even the great Aristotle can be wrong.
So she's not just blindly following tradition, she's questioning everything.
Exactly. And this actually ties into her proto-feminism.
How?
Well, by questioning these big authorities, these men who everyone thought were always right.
Mm-hmm.
She's challenging the whole system.
The patriarchy.
The patriarchy. She's a historical thinker. She's not afraid to look back and say, hey, maybe we've been wrong about this.
Right.
And there's another interesting theory about her work.
What's that?
Some scholars think she might be using a kind of skepticism.
Skepticism.
Yeah. Like maybe she's not really trying to prove that women are superior.
Oh, so what's she doing then?
Maybe she's trying to show that the whole idea of superiority between men and women, it's a shaky concept.
I see. So by arguing so strongly for one side,
Exactly.
she's actually making us question both sides. That's really interesting. So maybe her ultimate goal wasn't to flip the hierarchy and put women on top, but to get rid of the hierarchy altogether.
Maybe. And then there's her later work, Exhortations to Women.
Right. That's a different tone, right?
Oh, yeah. On the surface, at least, it seems like she's giving more traditional advice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she even tells women not to try to be writers.
Whoa, that's a big change from the nobility.
It is. And so some scholars think maybe her views changed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she became more conservative.
You're right.
But others think maybe it's ironic.
Ironic.
Yeah, like maybe she's still critiquing male domination, but she's doing it in a more subtle way.
So it's like she's playing a different game now.
Right.
Because the rules have changed.
Yeah. And the thing is, the text itself is full of irony and paradoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And even the guy who printed it, he was known for publishing works that had these hidden meanings.
Oh, okay.
So it's hard to say for sure what she really meant.
Right. It just goes to show how complex interpreting historical texts can be.
Oh, it can be really tricky. We have to think about the historical context, the social norms, the intellectual trends. And we have to remember that people back then, they might have used language and arguments in ways that we don't fully understand today.
It's like trying to decode a secret message.
It is.
Well, this deep dive into Lucrezia Marinella has been fascinating.
It's been a journey.
It really has. So just to recap for our listeners, Marinella's main argument is that women are superior to men.
In every way.
Intellectually, morally, even physically.
Yeah, she makes a strong case.
She does. And this was a really radical idea for her time.
Oh, yes.
But she backs it up with all this philosophical reasoning and evidence. She talks about the nature of the soul, about body temperature, about beauty, all to prove her point.
Yeah, she was a brilliant thinker.
For sure. And I think for us as philosophers, it's so valuable to read people like Marinella.
It is.
Because it helps us understand how these debates about gender and power have evolved over time.
Exactly. It shows us that these questions, they've been around for centuries.
Right. And people have been grappling with them in all sorts of interesting ways.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, think about Marinella's arguments and the time she was writing in. What do you think is the most enduring part of her challenge to traditional hierarchies?
That's a good question.
Yeah. And what new questions does her work raise for us today about nature, gender, and equality?
I think she would have a lot to say about our current debates.
I think so, too. Well, this deep dive into Marinella's thought has only just scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to explore.
Right. Her work is rich and complex and full of these really interesting insights. So if you're intrigued, I encourage you to keep digging and see what other gems you can uncover.
That's a treasure trove.
It really is.